Welcome to the AI Files podcast, your ultimate destination for staying updated on all things artificial intelligence. You can find us in Apple Podcasts as well as YouTube. I'm Shadab Hussain, your co host of the show. I'm a director of data and AI at Microsoft with over 22 years of experience solely in the analytics and AI.
And I'm Jamie Basilico, co host of the AI Files as well. As a data and AI technical specialist and architect, I have over 35 years of expertise in data related and AI domains, having worked with many Fortune 500 companies throughout my career. Please note this is not an official Microsoft channel. The views and opinions expressed by the co hosts are their own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. That said, let's get into today's episode. We've got lots of new news that has really hit over the last week. And I guess part of that, I don't know, Shadab, do you want to announce to the audience maybe some of our new thoughts on how frequently we're going to be giving this information to folks?
Yeah, Jimmy, you're absolutely right. There's just so much going on in the AI world that I think bi-weekly that we had decided to do is probably not enough now. It becomes just too much, and the episode become longer, and we want to keep them short for our viewers. So, I think we've decided to do it weekly now. So that's good. That would bring more rhythm. People will have more content to listen to every week, and we'll have shorter episode. We will try to keep them under 30 minutes. So that is what we want to do. But one of the things that I observed, Jamie, and the reason we have to do this is, there is a cluster of launches and releases, right? So because this competition is so intense right now, what you see is somebody does something and their immediate competition will follow right away, right? Probably next day or even same day or the same week, which is what actually is condensing a lot of launches and news suddenly in one week, and while the other week maybe a little bit drier.
Yeah, I call it leapfrog. Everyone's trying to get one up on the next vendor, next partner, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I think that is what we will touch upon this week as well. So this week will be awesome. One of the thing is, Jamie, I'm excited. Did you catch up the Olympic ceremony?
I, I saw the opening ceremony. I felt bad for those folks because they were getting poured upon on Friday when they were doing the opening piece. But I guess with Olympics in mind, I think you've got something for us as well, kind of quote unquote Olympic related, right?
Yeah, I thought that, and the good thing is that US got its first medal now already yesterday. But I want to talk about a little bit different Olympic or Olympiad, right? So, Math Olympiad, very popular ever since when I was a student. It used to exist. I never won anything, but I used to try. Um, so, in this week news, Google DeepMind AI system Alpha Proof and Alpha Geometry to actually achieved a milestone. They won actually silver medal at the International Math Olympiad, which is very tough, to do that honestly. And this is the first time that AI has actually shown that level of capability in the math. We have talked about the Deep Blue and other systems winning the chess competition and Go and other thing, but the math has been a little bit less, capable. But this is a really good step in terms of the AI's capability in math as well.
No, that definitely is good. I mean, everyone thinks about generative AI, and everyone knows that it's not great at math. Definitely, it's getting better, and you can see that on some of the benchmarks. So, is I don't know if you have any insight, but is Google intending to use these, the alpha proof and alpha geometry to go back into Gemini, or any indications on what they were thinking there, or is this just more of I don't want to say a PR appear some, because obviously if it got a silver medal, it was obviously doing very well. But what are the intentions of this? And I guess I'm thinking a little bit ahead of how this could be applied in terms of real world pieces.
I'm sure that this is while this is of course a marketing gimmick, but it's not just that. I think they're developing these capabilities, they're testing it out, and new solutions keep coming. In fact, I was playing with there is a math AI application by Microsoft which is available on the iOS. You can play with it, and I was telling my kids about it. So I think the company like Microsoft, Google, they are actually continuously looking into the math and science, the education aspect as well. We know about the collaboration between Khan Academy and Microsoft, and I'm sure that Google is also. So these events, these PRs are actually good exercise to demonstrate the capability, generate an influence, as well as develop the capabilities further.
Sounds good. And I might have to ask you a little bit more about that math app because my son's doing some intermediate calculus for school. So he might want to use that
Yeah,
potentially.
actually, that's a good point. In fact, I'm going to actually test that with my kids. We're going to throw a bunch of equations, and you can take actually photograph of the page where the problem is, and then actually it will solve the problem. So yeah, I'm also actually looking forward to it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Um,
Um, what else, Jamie?
so, there's been some, I'm going to jump a little bit around this one because this is a topic where I'm going to introduce a paper. It's actually a research paper. And I'll give you some of my thoughts because, what I'm about to talk about is really about a prompt report. This was something that was co-collaborated with Microsoft, OpenAI, Stanford, University of Maryland, Princeton. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, as well as from a company called Learn Prompt. But this is a prompt report. It's really was focused around understanding all of the various different prompt techniques that have been documented, and trying to analyze, well, how well are those prompt techniques, as well as, for lack of better terms, bringing all of those different capabilities around prompting together in almost one single view of different prompt ways. So the
Hmm.
bottom line with this one is that it identified over 200 different ways of using prompts, everything from like doing text only or multimodal, things like how to best prompt for images or videos, or even things like multilingual or doing evaluation capabilities, or even some of the new things around agents. And we just had Simon on our podcast talking about agents. So these are techniques, basically how to prompt. And as I said before, it's not like they created new concepts. Yeah, there's some things that they looked at in terms of benchmarking, but they looked at over 1,500 different published papers from various different sources. And it really is focused on what are the most effective ways of prompting. Things like in context learning, chain of thought, the need for these standardized different evaluation frameworks. So uh, it's a pretty easy read. It's not like you have to be a doctorate in generative AI. It's about 75, 76 pages. So if you devote an hour or so, just read through it. My perspective on this is that a vast majority of people that are trying to use large language models, quite frankly, don't know how to ask proper questions in these models. So if you just read through this prompt report, it's going to give you a whole slew of insights on how to best work with the model. So, and I'll give you
Hmm.
an example. Sander Schulhoff, who's the CEO of Learn Prompt, did an interview recently, talking about this prompt report, and he gave an example of like, what are 6 things that people should think about when they want to do few shot prompting. And again, these are things that were discussed in this paper. Some of these are kind of just standard thinking. Like in few shot prompting, you're giving good examples, but you're giving examples, but one of the things is you want to provide good examples. And this paper defines, well, what a good example actually is. And then the other piece is that the more good examples that you provide, the better the output. So to me, those are like common sense, right? But
Hmm.
the paper and the things that Sandra goes through is that you get better results by actually randomizing the order of the examples that you put into your prompt. Meaning that if you always constantly give your examples in, let me give your good examples, bad examples, and you always do it that way, well, the model might actually end up being more biased because your good examples are up front, or the positive versus negative. I don't want to say good examples because they're all potentially good examples that you're putting in. So randomization of your examples are important. He also gets into things like label correctness, providing examples in a common format, meaning you don't want to mix and match formats, because the model, I don't want to say gets confused, but it's then thinking about different things and may not give exactly what you want. And then one of the last ones is providing examples that are close to your request or what you're actually intending for. So this is just, one little snippet of the things that are in this Learn Prompt guide. And it's a very good read. And like I said, I went through the paper. I probably want to read through it again because there's just so much in there. And I go back to the comment that I made before, is that if you're new to how to actually prompt models, this is going to be great. Even if you're not new to it and want to rethink some of the things that you're looking at, I think this guide is really, really good. Now, what the guide doesn't do is doesn't say like, hey, this is going to be the technique. So it provides a bunch of different techniques. Yes, they do some benchmarking of ways to think about it, but to me, this is about getting more exposure and then choosing what's the best prompt techniques for you as you're running through whatever things that you're looking to do within the models. Now, the one thing that I'll say, and I kind of alluded to this, is that I think eventually large language models are not going to need to have somebody be really good at prompt engineering, because they're going to just do that on its own, especially when you start to think about agents and how they work together. But we're not there yet. So to me, if you're able to run through and understand these techniques, you're going to be far better than, let's say, your maybe your competitor or your colleague. So this is going to be a way for you to elevate your interaction with these large language models.
That sounds really great. Actually, I think a lot of people are looking for these kind of practices, and it makes sense because the answer really depends on the question that you ask, right? So the quality of the question determines the answer. So this would be actually fascinating read. I'm also going to read more into detail about
Yeah.
this.
So
And
we'll put the link in the show notes so everyone could go back and read it afterwards.
yeah, great. Now, from that academia, research kind of thing, I want to actually move on to a different aspect altogether, the commercial. There was actually a report that was doing rounds about the OpenAI burning like $5 billion in the losses this year potentially, etc. Now, what does that mean, right? I mean, sometimes these kind of things could create a anxiety or even a panic. So basically what happened was that the information, which is a bureau of the in news, and they do a lot of reports, etc. A great website, by the way. So they actually came out with a report saying that potentially the OpenAI is burning. I mean, not everything is openly available in terms of the public, but they have done their investigation, that they believe that OpenAI is on track to actually do the revenue. They have grown a lot, so they will hit the revenue about $3 to $4 billion in the annualized revenue very soon, because they're already reaching about $283 million. Um, so However, their running costs are becoming too high as well. And it highlights, for example, the running cost of those could be like about $4 billion running those chat GPT and application. Then they talk about the talent cost, the operationalization cost, etc. The essentially the team that is growing. So that's roughly about $1.5 billion. And then they talk about the other costs as well, which they're running, like in terms of training, etc. They've done a lot of partnerships with the content provider as well, so that could run up to $3 billion kind of per year. That takes up to like $8 billion. And then after the revenue, they project that the losses could be in $4 to $5 billion. Now, this is despite the fact that Microsoft actually provides a very discounted service and the infrastructure to the OpenAI. So now that's the thing. So their projection was that, okay, it looks like the OpenAI will need another round of funding to actually cover those losses. Now, here's the funny part, right? I mean, these are the companies which have like one of the fastest growth, one of the in the hardest area, and yet they're running in the losses. But my point is, so what? The Amazon ran in the losses for several years, right? Before they even turned a profit. This is a business that you develop. It takes time. They're not wanting to actually turn a profit in the next year itself. You create customer. It takes time. And that's why, however, you also need deep pockets like Microsoft's deep pockets to support a company like this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, yeah, I think of it this way. It's like you're going to start research first, and you're going to spend a lot of money to do that research, to do the development, to do the testing, the training, or the training, then the testing. So it's not surprising, especially for the companies on the forefront that are really pushing that envelope, that they're going to be spending now. If that continues over a period of time, then yeah, that might be another issue. But for a company where their charter is to develop AGI, to me, you have to do that spending in order to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And on the related front, you also see that, okay, you may wonder that, okay, if they are running the loss, and by the way, Anthropic is no better situation, right? So Anthropic has roughly about 1/10 or 1/8 of the revenue of the OpenAI. They're going faster, they're smaller though, but their running cost is almost half as OpenAI, right? And they provide a lot of people are trying there, so they have a lot of free consumption kind of cost as well. So they are in no better situation, and they have some support from the Amazon, but they're also going to have the struggle. And that also brings another point. So if these companies, the OpenAI and Anthropic, which are like the top two probably in terms of the ability to capture the business, what about others? Like there is a Cohere, and there are so many open source as well. Well, I would say that it is already showing up. Look, Mistral actually just released Large 2 model, which we will talk about very soon. That model now is no more open for the commercial use, and they want to make money. So now the commercial license is separate, which will be paid. So far their models were like all Apache license, so you could use it without, like, no string attached kind of thing. But no
Mhm.
more, you can use it for the non-commercial use, but not for the commercial use freely. Now you need to talk about the costing, etc., as with them. So they also need to make money. Now, Meta, Llama, etc. Meta has been actually given as an example of that. Okay, look how the open source, they can still have the cutting edge models and it still can be open source. Well, Meta's business model is different. Meta is not doing it for the open source model. They are actually developing it for their products, and they also incidentally making it available for the public consumption so that it can be better off. It's all business sense. So to be honest, it's all just a different variety of business sense. It's not about and this is the time that still the research, is still the investment continues to happen.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the whole, I mean, I know you just mentioned about Meta, and we'll talk about that and some of the releases, but there was a whole position paper about open source that Meta put out, or actually Sam did, and it's very interesting in the insights that he goes into as it relates to, well, why are they doing what they're doing, and how are they trying to promote an open source environment. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Maybe we would have a whole show just about what it means from an open source perspective on generative AI models out in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and one of the things is, Jimmy, that people may ask question that, okay, then why are the models pricing being reduced if they are still running the losses? Well, I think that's not necessarily the related issue. Like for example, the GPT-4o, which is a frontier model, that was about $5 for 1 million input token and $15 for 1 million output token. And then Claude 3.5 Sonnet came, which is roughly equivalent to in the same capability. Of course, it is not a multimodal in terms of the output. So not exactly, but in many of the parameters, it actually reaches that capability as GPT-4o. That came about $3 per million input token and $15 million. So that a little bit cheaper, just a little bit cheaper in the input. And then GPT, of course, the OpenAI responded. They launched GPT-4o Mini. That is astoundingly 90% cheaper than the GPT-4o. So that costs only 15 cents per million input and only 60 cents per million output. That's almost 90% drop. So it's like incredible how the price continues to drop, yet the losses are incurring. However, the losses are incurring for the future purpose. The price is actually they are trying to optimize for today, and of course there is a competition element as well. So open source will continue to be honest, struggle against such a steep drop of the prices that continues to happen in the closed models.
Yep, definitely. So, switching context a little bit, you talked about advancements, and not only advancements in models and things that are actually being pushed out there. Recently, Amazon actually launched a partnership with GE Healthcare for medical diagnostics using artificial intelligence. To me, this is very interesting. I mean, we talk about ways that businesses are using AI, which is great, and it certainly has its applications within businesses. But when we start to talk about where artificial intelligence could help with medical diagnostics to help things like discover, maybe cancer or the next things that, may be impacting or inflicting the human race. To me, this is where it makes a huge difference on, overall human population. So, Amazon did announce this strategic collaboration to develop purpose-built foundational models with using generative AI, or at least wrapping them into Gen AI based applications to help clinicians improve medical diagnostics and ultimately that patient care. So, I know that there's been, other scenarios or other announcements. I know OpenAI had some things recently as well. But to me, this is something, how are we, making human life better with artificial intelligence? And this is just one of those ways. So, certainly applaud some of these things that, Amazon and others are actually doing in this space.
Yeah, and the state governments are also not too far behind, Jamie. They are also trying to entice the AI companies and bring them in. And it is related because you talked about the health related, the partnership. New Jersey, the state government and the governor Murphy, he actually signed a legislation to give some tax awards to the companies who will invest in New Jersey, and bring the AI. It could be related to AI products, services, and whatnot. Um, but remember, the New Jersey is also a kind of a hub for the pharma. It's called a mecca of life sciences, pharma. So they are also actually trying to promote use of more AI in that field, like medical modeling, etc., and things like that. And they've in fact also done a collaboration with the Princeton University to develop an AI hub. And I love that because I live in New Jersey, and you used to too. So yeah, that's a good news. Hopefully, the gravity of those all those AI work, which continues to happen more in Silicon Valley right now, Anthropic and Cohere is which is also in Canada, but then OpenAI, everything is right now. Hopefully, it will get more spread out across the country.
Sounds good. Look forward to it. New Jersey's pretty much been on the forefront, certainly, in talking about things around. I'll say cross section between legislation and then being able to work with the pharmaceuticals. So not surprising.
Yeah.
So I know we've got a lot to talk about as it relates to launches, and we've got a few things to show you as well. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about what has been released over the last week. And it seems like it's a dizzying array of things that were announced, and it kind of goes back to what you said up front. It's all of these different companies trying to leapfrog each other, and this week or this past week or so has been no different. So Meta announced their new series of Llama models, Llama 3.1. So they announced updated versions of their 8 billion and 70 billion parameter model, which is great. But they also announced and released their long-awaited larger model, their 405B, which is the 405 billion parameter model. The So a couple little comments here on this one. So Meta not only announced it, but they also released it at the same time, which is different than some other companies that kind of talk about capabilities, but still are not out there yet for people to try. So definitely applaud Meta on that. So the results of what the 405B model is, in my opinion, astounding. It is pretty much what I'll say on par with the leading foundational model, aka GPT 4.0. When you look at some of the MMLU, which is like the standard benchmark, it is very close. And we can get into showing some of the numbers, but it's on par. I don't think you're going to see vast differences as you're using, let's say, the Llama 405B versus the GPT 4.0. other things that Meta put into these models across all of them, to be honest with you, is an expanded context length window, now 128,000 tokens. It supports up to 8 different languages, including that within the 405B. So, great advancements. As I mentioned, different languages that are supported: English, German, French, Italian, Portuguese, Hindi, Spanish, and Thai. And again, these are ways that they're actually able to use different dialogue in their use cases and the ways that you actually connect with the model. What's also interesting is, yes, this is an open source model, but Meta also worked with many different partners in the ecosystem to go live and be ready with these with these new models. So over 25 different partners in total: AWS, NVIDIA, Databricks, Dell, Microsoft is one of them within Azure, Snowflake. So literally, you go out there today, you can start using these models. And I will, when I get into the quote unquote the Jamie's toolbox, I'll show you, the Meta model, at least working inside of Azure via models as a service. So that is one thing. Let me just mention that right now, at least from a Microsoft side. Yes, you can take the Llama 3.1 model, whatever version that you want, and you could run that as a models as a service. So you don't need any hardware, you don't need any VMs, or you could do it just like grab the model and actually put it on your own hardware or your own virtualized VM. So these are things that I think are really, really interesting, and the things that could be actually done with this model. So the other thing that I wanted to point out with the model, or at least with the with the Llama 3.1 405B model, is that they took a slightly different way of actually building the model. So it still uses this concept of experts, but slightly different in the way that, let's say, GPT-4o is built. But here's the important one. They're using a notion for synthetic data generation and distillation. So what this really means is that you could use a 405B model to go create data and use that to do fine tuning for the smaller models. So you could actually use the combination models together to help, basically as a teacher model, to those other models. And again, whether or not you're using the Llama 3.1 8B or 70B or some other model that you could use for fine tuning, doesn't really matter. You could use this to create really good synthetic data, which is important because when you talk about actually doing fine tuning, you need those tuples, you need good data to actually produce what you want for an output on your fine tuned model. That's something that I think is super important, and some things to consider around what 405B really brings to the table, and the importance of that. And like I said, we'll put into the show notes, going out and read the metrics, but what Llama 3.1 405B can produce, it's quite stellar. And as I said before, the MMLU is pretty close to, when I say pretty close, it's literally like 0.1% away from GPT-4o. And there are a couple of benchmarks that they outshine even GPT-4o or Anthropic Sonnet. And obviously they outpace what Gemini has.
Meta certainly leads the open source model. One of the things is that I really like about this distillation is that we have learned, Jamie, from this SLMs, etc., that the quality of data is extremely important. The size of the model itself can doesn't need to be as big as long as the quality of data is really good. And the distillation, where this like a teacher student model, the frontier model becomes like a teacher, and smaller models can become like a student and take only the synthetic data, the curated data. That becomes actually very, very important. I think that collaboration between the models is actually the future. um, I did try, by the way, the Medal 3.1 on WhatsApp, and anybody can try that. And I did it. So what I did is simply I asked it to actually tell me the meaning of my wife's name. Meaning of my wife's name, Rubina, which is actually a word in It has roots in, I think, Persian, Arabic, but also is a word in Urdu. Um, Kind of relate to Ruby, as a gem. Now it gave me actually number of different languages and say that Rubina means this in that language, right? And it listed, I think, about six languages, including Sanskrit, which I found very surprising because Sanskrit does not have any word related to Ruby. Like it has a different word altogether. Ruby is not a word in Sanskrit. So how can the Rubina be? So I asked it, how can Rubina be or mean something? Because it says that Rubina also mean related to Ruby in Sanskrit. I said, how can that be? Because there is no word like Ruby in Sanskrit. The word for Ruby in Sanskrit is actually Prayagraj, or there's another some words. It has no relation with Rubina. It immediately corrected. It says that, yes, you are right. That was a mistake. I continue to learn, and hopefully, continue to get the feedback, etc. I found it very funny that a model this size can get that wrong, but is immediate to apologize. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it again after a few days, and
Hmm.
see did it really learn or not, or it was just like me saying sorry but doing the same thing again.
Yeah,
So we'll see about that.
that's interesting for sure. Um, and like I said, I'll show some things very quickly a little bit later on using the Llama 3 405B in Azure. But I do want to mention one thing, and let me bring something up on the stage. So, we talk about these open source models. You still need to run them somewhere, right? So just because something's open source doesn't mean it's free. So what I started to look at is, all right, if I take this Llama 3 405B model and I want to run that, how can I run it and what's the cost? So uh, I'll explain a couple things here. One is Azure, as I said, one of the partners in that ecosystem with Meta, enables you to run Llama 3.1 models, whether I'm dealing with the 8B, the 70B, or the 405B. Obviously, the 405B is going to be the most intensive one to use. So what I looked at here is taking a scenario where I have a whatever quote unquote inference I want to run. I actually looked at a 70-30% split, meaning that if I have a prompt and I'm looking at the output, my output is going to be 30% of my overall number of tokens. Now, why is that important? Typically, that will be the scenario where I've got tokens going in that's going to be less than what I'm expecting out. You might have differences, but let's assume that space. So I took the calculation of what it would take to run the 405B model on Azure in a model as a service, which means you don't need to stand up any hardware. You don't need to worry about, a physical machine, a virtual machine. It just runs because Microsoft is handling all that for you. What's interesting is where does that, what I'll call like waterfall, or where does that inflection point occur when models as a service, at least for the 405B, become not advantageous from a price standpoint? So there is some cross section here. So the blue line is the models as a service cost using that same inference and or the input and output. So where this actually crosses, and by the way, I've got two different scenarios here. And yes, you want to think about using GPUs. So I picked a 40 GPU VM using 320 gigs of RAM. So it's not like a small machine for obvious reasons. But there's two ways of pricing out a Azure VM of that size. One is just doing pay as you go for that VM. The other one is doing, at least on the Azure world, we call it a 3-year reserved instance. Basically, you're saying, yes, I'm going to guarantee them to use that machine for 3 years. So the monthly cost is a little over 5,000. It's actually $5,095 per month for that pay as you go, and the 3-year reserved instance is 3143. So, all right, with those two costs in mind for that VM, which means I could just take the 405B model, put it on that machine and let it run, right? No cost other than running the VM. Well, if I look at doing models as a service, the inflection point comes in at a little, I'll call it here in this line, probably around 380 million tokens. So unless I'm doing 380 million tokens in a month, it's going to be more cost advantageous to do it with models as a service if I did a 3-year reserved instance. And it goes even higher. So if I was doing just a pay-as-you-go for that GPU machine to run that model on, I'm close to 600 million tokens per month. So again, do you have a application that is going to require that much? I don't know. This is where you have to do your own math. But what I could say is maybe potentially this, like for your development environments, instead of spinning up a VM to run a Llama 3 there, do it models as a service. And obviously, if you don't have a lot of applications, or if you have, a lot of apps, but it's nowhere near, 600 million tokens per month, well, the models as a service is going to be advantageous for you. If not, then yeah, you just go with a VM to do that. The other thing that I'll point out is, this VM, it's a single VM, it's a single point of failure as well. So with the models as a service, I could actually do some techniques to bring multiple models together. So other things to think about. Obviously, I'm not drilling deep into those architectural considerations here, but I just thought this was a simple plot to think about how these models might be costing.
I think this is really helpful, Jamie. A lot of companies look for these kind of information point to make a decision what makes sense. Now, this is model as a service versus hosted open source. How does this compare in terms of the cost, the model as service for, let's say, Llama model that you're demonstrating here, to the closed models like GPT-4 or something like that?
Yeah, so at least from a Microsoft standpoint, and you might be able to speak from other platforms, but for the models as a service for Llama 405B, as compared to GPT-4o, again, I'm comparing the biggest models from both sides. It's pretty much on par. So the models as a service is going to be roughly equal for running a 405B versus a GPT-4o. It's actually slightly more expensive. GPT-4 is 0.005 per 1,000 tokens, whereas Llama 3.1 405B is 0.000533. So just a little bit more expensive, but it's pretty much about the same cost.
Okay. Um, and yeah, it looks like that is similar cost across other platform as well. I think AWS is 0.005332. So okay. And is that GPT-4 cost or is that GPT-4 or mini?
That's GPT-4. So mini obviously is a lot less expensive, but me personally, I wouldn't try to compare GPT-4 mini to 405B. A better comparison might be to try to look at like GPT-4 mini versus the 8B model for Llama 3.1, that is.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I think these commercials, sometimes there is a notion that, okay, open source is a lot cheaper to actually run. But the truth is something else, right? So every company must do these kind of assessments. It could, like depending on your demand profile, it may, right? I mean, the kind of work that you're doing, the kind of it all depends, because many times the cost of the input and output can also vary. If your mix of input and output varies, you should do your calculation as well. But as Jamie demonstrated, that it is not so simple to say that, oh yeah, open source is always cheaper. It is not always. It is also not easy to say that hosted will be cheaper than the model as service pay as it go, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
So that was the news from Meta. I know that we have some other news launches, if you will, to get into. You want to talk a little bit about Mistral?
Oh yes, the so Mistral was of course not far behind, and as we talked about it, right? Generally, the company, because Mistral is like has been also leading the open source models, although that might change. We'll talk about that. Mistral also actually came right after the Meta It came actually with the Mistral Large 2. Now, Large 2 is not as big in terms of the number of parameters. It's only 123 billion parameters, fits on a single H100 node. Um, and it's also 128K context window, but it does claim to have some performance similar to like what the 501 the 3.1 llama is, right? So it is trying to compete in that space, because generally the llama and the Mistral models have been compared and put together as like an open source family, while the OpenAI and Anthropic are compared against each other. um, the thing is that it does have some capability. It supports actually more languages. It is trained on a lot of coding languages. It does a lot of coding work much better. But the thing is that this is with Mistral Large 2, the licensing is changing. So they actually shocked the world with a commercial license now. So it is no more available. Earlier, it was every model was available as Apache license, which means that you could use it for both the commercial as well as non-commercial without any any no string attached. In fact, but with this is not the case. So now it is available. Large 2 is available for any research work, but not for commercial. And for commercial, you have to actually get a commercial license, which the pricing is not fully disclosed. So you have to actually contact Mistral. How will that work? And that's how you actually have to do it. So, as I said right in the beginning, that the open source company like Mistral, they also need to find a ways to actually generate revenue, because that's going to be a key question in the coming year.
Yeah, and like you just pointed out, I mean, it's you got to go with economics sometimes, and your business model may change over time, and that's obviously evident here with Mistral. But again, kudos to them for devising new models and also thinking about their business needs.
Yeah.
Um, one, again, we're talking about launches. I think one of one of the ones I think has been in in the minds of people that it was probably coming, and I know that there was a lot of chatter and talk. People thought when GPT-4o was being announced that it wasn't going to be about GPT-4o. Um, there was a lot of speculation that OpenAI was working on a search engine of sorts, and we got the truth of that this past week. So OpenAI did launch what is being called Search GPT. So it's a new searching prototype, obviously aimed at providing very fast and accurate answers with clear sources based upon the data that OpenAI has used, and part of the things that have been training their models. So it's been put out there as a prototype. It's not ready for people to use. There's actually a wait list. I signed up for the wait list, so I can't wait to get my hands on that. But the intent here is to really integrate real-time web information with conversational capabilities of their Gen AI models, and it's really meant to enhance the user experience by not only offering those direct responses, but the ability to to follow up based upon follow-up questions in that more human-like type of interaction. What's also interesting here is that OpenAI is partnering with various different publishers to highlight or introduce high quality content and to ensure this transparent attribution or citations of where this thing is coming from. And that makes sense because if you think about all of the, let's just call it legal woes that OpenAI has had with some content creators, but also new partnerships that they formed over the last 6 months with some other content creators. This kind of feels like where they were going to propose this new environment for searching. So certainly this prototyping, they're going to certainly solicit feedback from users and the features. So I would say once this gets rolled out and once I get my hands on it, I'll certainly provide that in one of our future shows.
That's true. I think that's the curtain falling down on the era of blue links, right? Certainly, the search behavior is changing. My search behavior has changed, Jamie. Ever since the Copilot came out. Now, actually, I use Copilot a lot more than the traditional search. So, I want answers. I don't have to go through, right? Blue links are not a destination; it's a journey. And similarly, as OpenAI released this announcement of the search GPT, Microsoft also came out with the announcement of generative search. And it's very interesting to see how different companies are taking different approach. Of course, Perplexity fired the shots earlier, and they have created this answer engine, which is very popular, and it is competing now head on with the Google. But Microsoft is also transforming its own search, right? So the Bing, if you look at it, if you go to the Bing, when you do the search, the Copilot on the right panel will give you the answer, and I love that. I actually now use Copilot so much more compared to any of the blue links. But then this generative search from Microsoft, which will be available in Bing, is also for a limited preview. Not everybody can access it, but it actually kind of combines the traditional search and the new search. So there is this whole concept of generative search or generative internet where you are asking a query and that content will be synthesized from different sources and created for you just for that simple search that you have, right? So it is generated for that particular query, and that's why it is a generative search. So it is a synthesis of a new way of giving that answer, and it has a multitude of things. So it has a combination of traditional search, traditional links. It has a combination of specific answers, specific videos. It will give a citation of the sources, so all that. So I love that preview. Actually, you can see it here on this screen. Here is how it will look like. It is available on the Bing blog. The search, if you make a search, you will get an answer here. Let's say, how long can elephants live? You get an answer here right away, which is the answer summary. You also get the traditional search results, which if you want to prefer that way, you can use it. You can also do the document index. So in the document, you will get an index as well. So you can go to specific index that you want. You get a source citations, and you get some other related sections as well. So you can see this. I feel that this is actually another feature of search. Now, of course, OpenAI is taking a generative like in a different way. So they are coming with search GPT, which you can also see. This is their preview of that. Here, it is not a combination of a traditional search or blue links exactly, but the answers will be given. However, they will be very curated and reputable sources which will be cited, like root writers, right? Or the I think New York Times. These are the sources that they have done the partnership with. So, but the question will be, will they only show those sources which they have done the partnership, or will that be others as well? Will the others lose out? Because a lot of business, a lot of websites actually rely on the clickable links from the search results. So it's going to be interesting. Microsoft has said that in their generative search, they continue to maintain a healthy balance of the links, which will go out to the wider ecosystem of web. In the case of OpenAI, we will find out more details, how many links will be. But they also are going to support a little bit openness, not just the firms with whom they have actually done the partnership.
Yep.
Search, however, is going to be transformed regardless.
Very cool. No, it's amazing where we're going with generative AI, and then how the face of search is changing. It'll be interesting, to say the least.
Absolutely. Okay. I think this week was still full of a lot of things. Anything else, Jimmy, you have?
Yeah, let me, let's take 2 minutes, and then I think we could wrap it up from there. I do want to show folks the ways of using the Llama models. I'll put out something a little bit more in depth, but just to give you a quick rundown, because we did talk about the Llama 405B and being able to do that in a models as a service, and also showed some cost comparisons. But let me actually show you how you could spin that up. So if you're not familiar, Azure AI Studio is our development environment, but it also provides a model catalog. So there's tons of different models. If I go into a collection, I could actually pick those Llama or the meta models, and you see all of the various different models that are out there. But you also now see the Llama 3.1 models. So there's also some things that we can get into that came out in terms of like prompt guard and other aspects. But here's the Llama 405B instruct model. This is the one that we're able to do models as a service. You could also do that for the 8B and the 70B. So if you click on the particular model, you can see information about that model. Different information about what the model is. It'll also tell you the price or the cost for the inference, both on input and output tokens. All right, so you see that there's a deploy button here. This will actually help you then create that models as a service. I've already done that. So if you look at my deployments and my subscription here, I've deployed GPT-4o and the Llama 3.1 405B, and these things are actually running right now. Again, the great thing is it's models as a service. So unless I'm actually hitting it with some quote unquote inference, I'm not getting charged for anything. And the really cool thing here within the AI Studio is I could actually start to build applications. I could use prompt flow, which is a way of us creating logic against these models, but I could also run things within the playground. So I could do a chat playground against whether or not I want to run GPT-4o or this Llama model. So I could even add my own data. So again, preview, but I could do a RAG type pattern against this. I'm going to bump this up a little bit into max tokens that I want to do. I'll just show you something very quick because I was testing out this model in a very quick manner. This is a prompt that I typically use when new models come out. I want to see how well it acts against it. So this is more of a logic and a reasoning where, I'm trying to fake out the model, to be honest with you, because I gave it some information that's not relevant. And I'm asking to do a somewhat of a math problem for you, for me, for you. And you notice here, what's interesting is that it broke down the steps, and I didn't ask it to do that. But ultimately, this came up with the right answer, which is 1 apple and 2 oranges left, because like I said, I gave it some wrong information. So bottom line, 2 things. One, you could set up models as a service very quickly inside of the Azure AI Studio and the Azure ecosystem. And the model performed very well, in this at least one simple test. I've done some other tests against it, but in whatever it was, 60 seconds or less, showed you how and where you can stand up models as a service against this very capable 405B model, and showed you one simple example of actually working with that model with a reasoning test. So anyway,
So it did pass. Looks like it did pass the Jamie's commonsensical test.
yes, it did. Yep, flying colors.
Good, awesome.
Anyway, so I know we covered a lot, and I think we said we wanted to make this one a little bit shorter, but just a lot to talk about, and it looks like we didn't hit that mark, but hopefully you found it very interesting and useful for the things that we covered today.
Yeah, we blame it on the AI world. There's just too much happening. But great.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we look forward. Make sure that you subscribe, share, like, and stay tuned for weekly episode. We also have guest bonus episode where we invite guests. So look out for those as well.
Yep. And have a good week, everybody. Till next
Bye
time.
everyone.